We now want to begin with our speakers. We've got 3 speakers today and 3 evaluators. And our first speaker for the day is Brian Heaton. Brian is here. I'm looking, yes, he is. Thank you for joining us today, Brian. And Brian's title of, the title of Brian's speech is Daily Habits to Achieve Happiness. He's doing a speech from Motivational Strategies Path, Level 1, speech number 4, evaluation and feedback. There are 2 evaluation and feedback speeches in this path, and Brian will be giving his first speech, part 1 of 2. And so the purpose of this project is for the member to develop skills for delivering and receiving feedback. And the purpose of this speech is for the member to deliver constructive feedback on another member's presentation. So let us listen to Brian Heaton, Daily Habits to Achieve Happiness. I also want to mention that the evaluator for this speech is Andrew Bennett. So without further ado, Brian Heaton, Daily Habits to Achieve Happiness. Daily Habits to Achieve Happiness, Brian Heaton.
Warm connections or relationships. I did a speech on that recently, and that's the key to happiness, according to a book published last month by the head of the world's longest-running study in happiness at Harvard Medical School. So 80 years of research shows that warm connections or relationships are key to happiness. And by warm, Harvard mean a relationship that feels supportive. Seems to me to fit with the Toastmasters ethos. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. Other people matter. To achieve happiness, you need warm connections or relationships. Practice these 4 steps daily: gratitude, relationships, interaction, good, and memory aid, Grig. So that's what I'm going to be covering in this speech as I go through it. So today I'd like to do 3 things. First, to use 3 words to summarize the findings of 25 years research of positive psychology. Second, to use 1 word as a memory aid for that summary. And third, to recommend 4 steps that you can take daily to help you achieve happiness. If you just bear with me, I've got a visual background for each of these, which can improve, I think, the clarity of my speech. Just bear with me a moment. Sorry about this. I had a lot of technical problems today. This was here beforehand, but it does seem that it's gone. But I'm going to go through this anyway with apologies for my technical issues. So. Martin Seligman was president of the American Association of Psychology 25 years ago. And his key initiative as president was to introduce positive psychology as a field of scientific study. And this has stood the test of time over 25 years, and it has positive psychology is widely recognized as being valuable for the treatment of depression and for ordinary people to help build strength and well-being. Now, Seligman's positive psychology is a bit complicated, but a colleague of his, another pioneer, said you could sum up positive psychology in 3 words: other people matter. So a memory aid, and I'm going to send these in the chat afterwards, so that you can see them. The memory aid I've got is Grig, G-R-I-G. Now, Grig is a rare word, but you can find it in the dictionary, and it means a lively, live-hearted person. So I think Grig is a good memory aid for something concerned with happiness. And really, then, 4 words to summarize the findings of positive psychology, things you can do daily to help you achieve happiness. So first is G, gratitude. Be grateful for the blessings in your life. Focus on what you have rather than what you have not. It's not enough just to feel grateful to others. We need to express that to others. We need to do it regularly to have an upward spiral of positivity. And the second one, echoing the Harvard study, is relationships with others. Spend a few minutes thinking about your relationships with other people and reflect on any specific steps you could take to improve bonding. Related to that, we relate to others often by interaction. So this is R, G-R-I, interaction. Think about the interactions you have with your friends, your colleagues, your Toastmasters members, and your loved ones and people you know. Do you complain and focus on problems? Or do you celebrate the joys and seek out to others? Now, I can think of a number of members of the extended family. When we visit them, we get different things. One forever complains to my wife, to me, about us, about other people, forever complaining, a real misery guts. And so you can imagine whether that person is happy in her life. There is another one, and he's a busy guy, but he endlessly reaches out to other people. He does phone calls on Zoom to connect with family members. He does that with his extended family, old and young, and he's involved in his church, recently been elected as chair of his local community association. Is he happy? Well, I'll let you guess. So interactions with others. And the fourth one and the final one in Grig is good, your daily focus. Focus on what's good and what's going right rather than what's going wrong. Research shows that good things tend to happen day by day, 5 times as much as bad things. So focus on what's good. And ask yourself, what is the smallest thing I can do today to help grow more positivity in the world? So to summarize then, other people matter. To achieve happiness, you need warm connections or relationships. Practice these 4 steps daily: gratitude, relationships, interaction, summed up in the acronym GOOD. I'll put that in the chat, and back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Brian. Fascinating and intriguing speech about connections, something that we hold near and dear to us here at Toastmasters. The third speaker today is Violetta Saladienne. I hope I pronounced your last name properly. And she is a member of Shilling Speakers. She joined Toastmasters in 2020. She joined Toastmasters in 2020 and was awarded the Triple Crown in June of 2022. In her 3-minute speech podcast, she will present about the Shilling Toastmasters podcast. And Violetta joined the Shilling podcasting team in November of 2022, and since then has recorded 8 episodes and over 225 minutes, after which she will play up to a 10-minute extract from one of the podcast episodes. What is the purpose of this speech? Well, the purpose of this project is to introduce you to the skills needed to organize and present a podcast. So I want to introduce Violetta Saladienne. The title of her speech is Podcast from Presentation Mastery Level 4, project number 2, Creating a Podcast. So Podcast by Violetta Saladienne podcast.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and most welcome guests. In November 2022, I joined Shilling Toastmaster podcast team, where Paul O'Mahony, Pat Caslin, Philippa Gray have been podcasting since March. It is a great way to practice public speaking, interviewing, and expressing your thoughts on different topics. It's very enjoyable for me too. So the podcast itself is divided into 3 sections or parts. The first one, so we are starting with a big idea of the week. Each of us, in 2-3 minutes speech, reflect our big idea. Then the second part is an interview, and we invite a guest and interview him or her. It can be a member of our club, or a Toastmaster from a different club, or a Toastmaster officer, like, for example, a past area director or a club president. This is the opportunity for a guest to be heard. And the third part of the podcast is called a soapbox. There, one of our team members, like podcast team members, speak more about more extensively on a topic of his or her choice for 6 or 7 minutes. For example, in one of the episodes, I spoke about how to be creative. Pat spoke on education. Philippa spoke about Nietzsche. And Paul spoke on how to be elected to an international role within Toastmasters. Since I joined, we recorded, as already our Mr. Toastmaster said, 8 episodes and more than 225 minutes. Our podcast is published on Spotify. This is the episode number 26, published on the 23rd of November, one of my first I have recorded. I will play 8 minutes of this, and now I will share my screen. 1 second. Yeah. Oh. Can I share my screen, please? Who is the host? I think. Yes. Yes, now I can do that. So I hope you will hear it. All right.
This week's podcast is kicked off by Violetta Saladiene. Over to you, Violetta.
Do you hear it? Yeah. Good evening, listeners. Thank you for joining us today in Shilling Speakers podcast. Today we have our week's Shilling podcast, and we started with our colleagues Philippa Gray.
Hello.
And Paul Amani.
Lovely to be here.
And our guest this week, Cyril Mannion.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me.
And today we start our podcast with the idea of the week.
That's right, Violetta.
Big idea of the week.
That's the one.
I was thinking all week, because I was very working intensively and working in the Crown Court. So my big idea of the week is about justice, because justice is not always delivered the way we would like to, but there's a very philosophical question. What is justice and how it can be delivered? Because there are so many different situations and circumstances and clues that we cannot solve even as much as we would like to. And sometimes it just comes very different ways. So I was thinking all days long, because today I had a very interesting case. The verdict was delivered in a case of murder, and the verdict could not be unanimous because 2 of jury members did not agree with what the majority say. And this philosophical question of justice is just goes round and round in my head, because it's very intensive, and it can be paraphrased or improvised in different ways. So that is the big thought of the week for me today. Back to you, Philippa. What is yours?
Oh, mine's quite different, Violetta. I've had a busy week, including my first go at taking my turn at editing this podcast. And I made my first attempt, and wow, I recommend audio editing, everybody. It is really good fun, and it seemed really simple. And I was just patting myself on the back. I'd got the podcast edited, uploaded, scheduled for publication. And then I realized I'd forgotten to put our theme tune at the front and our section dividing audio and sign off at the end. So I had to re-edit it and learn a few new things and find the signature tune. And then I remembered, in the past, I've studied the Greek concept of hubris and nemesis. And boy, oh boy, did I have a lesson in hubris and nemesis. So just a reminder, hubris is, well, originally the Greeks saw it as challenging the gods. You think you are just so clever and so talented, you can take on anything. And of course, the Greek gods wouldn't stand for this. So they'd bide their time. They'd let you have a bit of fun, but then nemesis would strike. And you'd realize things weren't going your way and you weren't in control of your life. So that was a reminder. And I now know even more about editing podcasts than I expected to need to. But podcast did get published. So that was my week. But Paul, how about you? You had any big thoughts?
Well, yes, a huge one, much too big for my brain to carry. But I'm just popping into the podcast from Sharm el-Sheikh. I've been there all week. And I must say that it has been shocking, utterly shocking. I've been disgusted. But then again, I can tell you it is absolutely wonderful to hear the best that the world's politicians are able to say. So.
And now I will play some other part. Captain Cyril.
But we do need to stop talking about them and start. I'm going to hand over to Violetta, who will interview our very special guest, Cyril. Violetta, the microphone's yours.
Thank you, Philippa. Welcome to our podcast, Cyril.
It's good to be here, Violetta. Thank you very much for inviting me.
That's a pleasure. Pleasure is mine. Cyril, I know that you are a retired captain, Cyril, from British Airways, and you're also a public speaker. So I would like to ask today, could you please tell us more about your world and what do you do?
Well, you've introduced, as I said, I finished my career flying British Airways, and then I went on to work for 2 different Indian airlines. But let me just link it into how, because I wasn't a speaker all my life, apart from obviously doing public addresses on airplanes and briefings and stuff when I was in the Air Force. But all this getting interested in public speaking started when just after the last flight, I did the last flight on about the 6th or 7th of September 2004 with British Airways. And my wife's Rotary Club invited me in to do a talk on this subject. So I was given 20 minutes. And I talked about my last few flights, which several things had happened, including, let me digress, a very funny incident where we arrived in Abuja, which you may know is the capital of Nigeria. And when I came down the stairs into the arrivals hall, my wife was at the bottom of the stairs and says, "I'm being sent home." I said, "What?" And she says, "Because I've come without a visa." So that progressed with me being on my knees to the head of the immigration section in Abuja airport, and it went on for about 20 minutes. And one of the things that my wife laughs about since was me practically on my knees to this man, saying to him, "I so love Africa. One of my first trips was to Africa." I didn't say that, it was Nigeria or to Rhodesia or Zimbabwe. But I requested specially to come to Nigeria. I so love your country. And he would turn around to me and say, "But you came without an invitation." And it went on like this. So I told this story among others, and I got such good feedback. They said, "Why don't you go and talk about it a bit more?" So after that, I joined Toastmasters in Swindon. And
that was the taste of what is to be in a podcast. And I played 10 minutes of this. And I hope you enjoy. And if you like it, please listen to our podcast. And now I stop sharing the screen. Thank you. And back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.